Yes, it's working.
We all heard that.
So now we have to be serious. And welcome to this first lecture of one of the two lecture series that I'm going to organize throughout the years, but starting this semester. This is the first lecture series, which is devoted to emergency constitutionalism, constitutional polycrisis, and rule of law and democracy in transition. A bit long title, unfortunately, as usual. And then the second lecture series will concern constitutional imaginaries. So there we'll have also several very interesting lectures, but I'll announce that lecture series on a later stage. And there will be also a conference on 28th of March, which is part of this project, the Summit project, which is devoted to representative democracy in crisis and the different technocratic challenges to democracy stemming from the rise of administration and the judiciary competing with traditional modes of democratic decision-making. Anyway, coming back to the current lecture, which is the first one of all of the series, but actually also the first of the Emergency Constitutionalism lecture series. This is the lecture of Maja Sahadzic, who is an excellent scholar and I hope a very good friend of mine. She's teaching constitutional law at least in two universities, currently mostly at the University of Utrecht in Netherlands, but also she was teaching, and I believe she has still some teaching activities in Antwerp in Belgium. So she's almost Benelux person, just Luxembourg is missing here. And also she's affiliated also with one, I believe, Bosnian legal institute, although Maja is a Croatian by origin. And she's also very active in ICON-S. More precisely, she is a co-chair of the Committee of New Directions and Scholarship of ICON-S. So her current lecture will be devoted to democracy, rule of law and technology, an impossible triangle. And to make the very long story short, or maybe just to pave the way to the lecture of Maja herself, because she will talk for like 1 hour about that. We are witnessing the immense pressure on fundamental constitutional principles produced by new technologies. And more precisely, Maja and me, we are very interested in rule of law and democracy and how they are impacted by the IT revolution and digitalization. So generally, Maja will speak about the impact of digitalization, digital constitutionalism on reinforcing or actually impeding the functionality of rule of law and democracy. So after this, I would say fast but not furious introduction, because we are very glad to have Maja with us. I'm very grateful to her for agreeing to participate in that project. You know, she will have also another lecture on a bit later stage where we hope to draw your attention to a joint project of ours, which we are working on. It will be a project on asymmetries, right? Because as you know, I'm, writing a lot on constitutional geometry. It's a theory that I tried to kind of invent and develop. And Maja is a huge expert in federalism and federations. And more precisely, she has researched extensively asymmetries in federations. So it will be like the first part will be devoted to the concept of geometry applied to multi-level governance structures, and then Maja will be the real lawyer among us, presenting some asymmetries in federations. Okay, so that's enough as an introduction, and I'm giving the word to Maja. So she'll have like 40 minutes to 1 hour to speak, as much as she wants. And then you will have the opportunity to ask all possible questions in the framework of legality and morality. So Maja, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much to everyone else attending this, talk. I wouldn't call it a lecture per se, because I think I'm going to open so many questions here that it will be impossible to actually make a proper conclusion, I think. I'm sharing my screen, and here you see I think I'm going to have to, because this is a very, this room is a very special, because it's technologically and it fits perfectly also with what we are going to discuss today, because it's technologically so advanced that I have a tablet here with me, and I have to follow my presentation on tablet while I see myself as a huge person all over this room. So I'm not sure how to counter that. But
it's like from the Brave New World, like anti-utopian vision.
Exactly.
But you have to speak a bit louder, because I don't think we can hear you very well. So
I will try to do that.
Or closer to the microphone. I don't know.
Okay, maybe like this. It should be better. But in any case, as you can see, the title of the presentation fits to this perfect technologically equipped room. It goes about technology, but also democracy and the rule of law. An impossible triangle, sort of to say. Why impossible? Because we still do not have answers to questions that we're going to ask today, or some things that we're going to discuss today. So I'm not sure how to move forward with the presentation. Let me see here. So the first part is actually, well, I kind of selected some of the concepts that I want to talk about today. And the first part goes about the connection between technology and the rule of law. I will start with the rule of law and how we actually perceive it as such. And as you already know, there are two different types of concepts. I'm not going to go deep into that. It's just as an introduction. We know that there is a thick and thin notion of the rule of law, depending on where the focus actually is. We have the rule of law that looks mostly into quality of the legal order, into the theory of legal order, and it is related to procedural requirements, it is related to the due process, and so on. So here we see that the focus is mostly on the courtrooms, and of course this type of notion revolves around courtrooms, and it emerged from the courtrooms. But then on the other side, we also have a little bit different notion, a little bit bigger, stronger kind of a notion of the rule of law, and that is related to the German theories, sort of to say, which puts a lot of emphasis to the connection between the legal system and the state. And here we talk about checks and balances, we talk about respect and fundamental rights, and so on. So in essence, the difference here is that in this notion of the rule of law, this thick notion of the rule of law, the connection is between the legal system, the state, the rule of law, and the quality here, or the theory about or the legal order. And that is something that I start with. And then I go to the next slide to actually show you how this thick notion is actually a little bit stronger, bigger, more furious than the notion of the rule of law, in the sense that they are both used as umbrella terms. We've seen it. They're both used as umbrella terms for different concepts, for different substantial principles, and so on. One of the requirements of the Rechtsstaat, or the thick notion, is that all state actions should be based on or limited by law, and that is the principle of legality as well. And then in addition, the authority of the state is to be divided into different branches, and this is related, of course, to the principle of the division of powers, and so on. And then it is complemented with fundamental rights, which can be also social rights. And this is very important for the today's discussion, because as the technology penetrates into the rule of law principle, we will see that there will be that some of those sub-elements will need to be tackled from a different perspective. We do have examples on how, for example, how the rule of law as a thick concept has been dealt with in different states. And that is also, that adds another layer of complexity because, for example, I just gave you the examples of Germany, which has, for example, the judicial review, non-retroactive application of laws. In the Netherlands, it is explicitly mentioned that the rule of law entails the separation of powers, human rights protection, and so on. But then also, for example, in the EU, access to the EU is also based upon the premise that the new member states, for example, abide by the rule of law. And that is encapsulated, sort of to say, in the Article 7 TF-EU, which contains, well, I would say a very weak mechanism. We've seen it in the past year or in past years with Hungary and Poland, in terms of how they discipline the member states who deviate from the rule of law as a principle, and so on. And here, normally there's unanimity needed, and so on. So even if we do have the rule of law explicitly mentioned in most of the Western legal systems, sort of to say, it is also very how can I say it? It is also very restricted type of concept when it comes to technology invading the concept itself. And you will see in a moment why I say that. Technology as such, I've pondered upon this for so many nights and days and months and years and so on, and especially because my significant other also works as a mechanical engineer in AI industry, and before that he used to work in the car industry related to some of the technological developments related to I don't know. Well, I cannot really say it right now because we are recording, but it's related, for example, to some of the technologies that do make our driving easier, but at the same time, it does require some pondering about what does it actually mean if an accident happens and so on. Sometimes I give students the example of the Tesla cars, which have those 360 cameras. And the privacy that has been breached by some of the employers by the Tesla company, who have been accessing those cameras to actually check how their garage, for example, looks like, or to check the consistency of how often do they go to the church and so on. So this is what technology means. As well, and this is how, for example, the breach of privacy happens, but also, it's related to other stuff that I cannot talk about in a very I can only talk about it in a limited perspective. But the thing is that technology as such came to challenge us through different ways. First, it came through stacks, and stacks are kind of set of technologies that are put together in kind of architectural way to solve the problems one on top of another, to solve specific types of problems. And when we talk about, for example, stacks, we are talking about the technology such as I don't know, MySQL. We're talking about PHP. We're talking about HTTP or HTTP and so on. And these come one on top of another. So for some services, you need this type of technology, and you will use it. And then to address something else within your company, you will use another type of stack. So that is how the stacks came in. But the issue with these is that there is dependency between these, and we never really regulated them properly. And as we were running late with, regulation of the stacks, then came the platformization. And the platformization as such, a platform, for example, is a product that everybody knows that because you're that generation, I think. The platform is a product that serves or enables other products or services. And it can be a social media platform such as Facebook, Instagram, I don't know, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever. It can be any type of e-commerce platform, such as Amazon, Alibaba. It can be Netflix, Spotify, whatever you name it. Or it can be marketplaces, whatever. These are all platforms. And now it seems that in recent years, tech companies have turned products also into data services, where customers also pay mostly with their personal information and attention. And then it went even further. It went into ecosystems where we have data, where we have AI, where we have robotics. And that is a field, as I said, where my significant other right now works. And I have lots of questions about it. And ecosystems, as such, they penetrate the whole infrastructures. They penetrate economic processes, they penetrate governmental frameworks, and so on. And just to give you an example, what happened in the Netherlands between 2005 and 2019, the government actually wrongly accused around, I think, 25,000 families or parents, indeed, for making fraudulent benefit claims, requiring them to pay back the money that they had received entirely. At some point, the prime minister resigned, but the fact was that it was the algorithmic decision-making that actually made the mistake. It was the algorithm that was designed for the administration that was making decisions. And in this sense, we are talking about the complete ecosystem that actually made a mistake. So this is how technology finally penetrated our, let's say, civil relationships with the government. So it's not only platformization, it is only an ecosystem. And this also brings forward the questions, among other questions, it brings forward the questions of how that relates to egalitarianism, how that relates to diversity, and so on. But then there's also something important, I think, that we need to discuss here when it comes to technology as a consequence of all of this. Well, what happened in the meantime is that all of these platforms, stacks not in particular, but platforms and ecosystems have been used. As I said, this scandal that happened in the Netherlands is just one of the scandals that happened. But what's happening in the meantime is that in some liberal democracies, such as, for example, Australia, anti-democratic risks started to become connected with technology. And these include, for example, as you see on this slide, public surveillance cameras or information control to mute, in this case, for NGO activists or journalists or human rights defenders. And here we see that there is a tension between techno-democracy and neo-authoritarian systems, sort of, to say that, that's how I call it. For example, in the Chinese government, that is not really a surprise for us. We already know that there is a great firewall in China that, China has the ambition to use the technology for social control and governance. So that is not something that is not clear. But as the technologies matured, as the platforms matured, as the ecosystems matured, what happened is that Chinese government's abuses have also deepened. So as I said, Great Firewall of China, but apart from that, we also see that China is using CCTV cameras and facial recognition, for example, to follow whether you're in the breach of speed limit or whether you're disposing your trash properly. So I have a video, but I cannot show it to you right now because it's very complex to show it. But in Shanghai, the government is collecting lots of information, the facial recognition information. So for example, if you go out of the house and you have, I don't know, the green bag is for, I don't know, PMD, which is like the green waste, the waste that should go to like the banana peels and so on. So if you dispose it in a wrong trash, within 5 minutes, there will be a police officer to charge you with a, I don't know, you will get a ticket. That is the point. But the thing is that it is based on the facial recognition, which means that the government is collecting a lot of unstructured data and transforming them into something very structured. And on the basis of that is actually able to create situations in which, you know, they can pick out specific individuals from the crowd and turning, you know, turning against them just because you're not disposing your trash in the proper way. But also, as I said, in liberal democracies, it happens as well. We've seen, I told you, in Australia, normally surveillance cameras have been used to mute NGO activists, but in USA, it is also obvious that it happens. What USA does, the USA portrays its own technologies as a democratic alternative, but I'm not sure if that's actually that, because this mass surveillance and the bulk data that they collect through the mass surveillance is also used for over-policing, and this actually happens especially in the communities of color. There are ways of how people try to avoid this. And for example, in China, in order to avoid facial recognition, they use face masks. That is not necessarily against the rule, because in China, we already know that we knew even before the pandemic, if you would travel to China, and if somebody would have a flu, they would normally wear a face mask because they were aware of the possibility of transferring the disease to another person. And there's too many people also around, so that was a normal thing. So there is nothing wrong about it, but it is also now becoming a problem for the Chinese government because it's used as a mechanism or an instrument against the government's actions. The thing that I normally ask about here to my significant other is that when you develop these technologies, when you develop the ways of how you put together all of these unstructured information into something structured, do you have any conscience about it? Do you think about the legal consequences? Do you think about the moral consequences of it? And the answer is normally no, because that's not what they do. They're just mechanical engineers, and what they're doing is related to the laws of robotics, for example, and that is that the technology should not harm the person and so on. So yeah, here we are with the technology obviously having some kind of an influence to the rule of law. And in which sense, I think we can just deepen this conversation further. I've just scratched the surface, I think. Oh yeah, in the EU, we had, I forgot about that. I guess I wasn't prepared enough for this, but in the EU, we did have a ban on facial recognition. That is for sure, because AI systems apparently could affect migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, but from a very negative way. And that is related to the fact that AI, in this sense, especially when it comes to the European Union, if it's used for facial recognition, is also dodged by biases. And that is very obvious in the cases when when the facial recognition struggles to determine non-white people apart. So that is also one of the biases, I'd say, why some people in the EU institutions pushed back against it. So we have lots of things, I think, to think about. One of the aspects I would like to talk about is actually the separation of powers, or the checks and balances, and how this related to the rule of law affects it. I think one of the ways, first, just a very short, small introduction, just a reminder that the aim of the separation of powers is actually to prevent the abuse of power and, of course, promote rights and freedoms. And then the approach that it has, it's the division of powers, limitation of powers, and balance of powers, that is quite obvious. And then also we know that the concept holds that public authority can be dissected into three different functions, and that is legislative, executive, and judicial. So just a small reminder. We also know that Montesquieu told us that, there would be the end of everything if there wouldn't be, the separation of power. But I think for us to understand why this is important in terms of technology is because we cannot forget to look into the separation of powers from the horizontal and vertical sense. Normally, we look at it from the horizontal level, where one level of government is either legislative, executive, or judicial. This is trias politica. We know that already. But then again, this is connected also to institutional, but also personal separation, personal and institutional separation of powers. Why is it important? Why do I think it's important to look at it from a little bit of distorted perspective? Because institutional is important to be added here, because it proposes the division of government into three corresponding agencies and maintains that they must be kept distinct from each other, while the personal relatedly insists that there should be no overlap amongst the personnel who staff these agencies. So at the same time, it still kind of says, they should be separated in order, of course, to prevent the arbitrariness and so on. But this will come back later, and I will tell you why. But then when it comes to the separation of powers, there is another level that is quite important when the technology breaches in. That is also the vertical, which is between several levels of government. Martin already told you that I work with federal systems. I work within the field of multi-level governance. And here, if you remember, I said anti-democratic risks, or anti-democratic technological advancements and so on. There's just simply and logically more anti-democratic entry points if there is a multi-level governance. It is just logical. And then also this relates to the territorial units, which means that at every level there is most likely the separation of power. So it is also coupled with the power sharing, power dividing, sometimes with federal principles. And I think I give here an idea of how to possibly, let's say, counteract these imperfections. I think it is important because, for example, when we talk about the checks and balances, we know from before, from the main studies, that each branch is checked by the other branch. We know that, we need to ensure that one branch does not have all of the powers. And we also need to counterbalance if there are some imperfections here, that we need to counterbalance them through, for example, mutual control, building interdependency, and so on. And we do that within the government, within the governmental realm. But here we have actors who are technology providers and so on. And now they're becoming also the actors. So where do we place them within the field of within the principle of checks and balances? Where do they come? Do they come outside? And are they checked and balanced from the government, or do they become part of the checks and balances procedures and so on? So there is a question to be asked. So how that develops, it is still to be seen. And then we also have, in many cases, in order to counterbalance, for example, the government actions, we have bicameralism to counterbalance imperfections that the government may impose, for example, on the citizens. But is this good enough to counterbalance, or is it anyhow related in counterbalancing, for example, just some examples, of course, to counterbalance what the technological corporations are doing? Well, I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe it can balance the power of groups, as I write here on the slides, within variation in their status, for example, social, ethnic, and so on. But what about the companies that are technology providers and so on? Where do they come here? So these are just two examples that I took from this whole concept, because of course I do not have that much time. I have only 40 minutes to an hour to talk about this. Some of the examples, why is it very complicated when we talk about the actors, their technology providers, developers, and so on, and how it counteracts towards specific states or specific systems. Every system is different. So even if we would have some potential response or reply, we have all kinds of different systems. If we take especially institutional, personal, geographical elements into consideration, then we know that every system is very different. And therefore, every system needs different ways for checks and balances, separation of powers, and so on. And we see it here. I'm not going to go into the details of, these are just the examples of how even within the EU that is trying to harmonize some of the legislation in this field, how different systems are very different. Where, for example, the Netherlands is unitary, decentralized, constitutional monarchy, but it's parliamentary with bicameral system. And then in Italy, there you do have a parliamentary system, but it's unicameral with lots of bilateralism. And in Belgium, it's a complete dynamic system, dyadic federalism, interdependence, bicameralism, and so on. So do these systems have a proper response or reply or approach altogether? Well, I'm not sure. Even with the AI Act, I'm not sure how this flows in every one of these systems. And for example, the EU as such as a reply, we say that it is, sui generis system with an institutional balance and balance of power between member states. So it has different nations, component states, differentiated integration, united in diversity, and so on. So that's also on top of everything. Is there a proper reply? Still a question to be answered. But related to this, there are some developments that are important to be considered, I think. If you look at this tree, why is it important? If you look at this tree, you will see that this tree, you remember the ecosystems from the beginning. So each tree here is part of a larger ecosystem. So it's a global network that is driven by different forces. And if you look at the roots are, for example, infrastructural systems built on, related to, internet, where the internet is built, where are the cables that are built on, satellites, microchips. So this is the hardware, wireless access points, and so on. And on one hand, we have tech firms that are trying or already are privatizing vital parts of this infrastructure. And for example, Google has invested billions of dollars in data centers across the globe. And for example, underwater cables as well for data distribution. But then on the other side, we have states that are trying to increasingly trying to control the digital infrastructure. And one of the examples could be the American attempts to control Huawei's efforts to develop 5G and so on. So there is one interaction that needs to be looked from the perspective of checks and balances and so on. So the rule of law. If you look at the trunk of the tree, this is more software. This is more like proprietary software, which contains components like operating systems. You take it as, I don't know, iOS, Android, and so on, you know it. Browsers like Chrome, Explorer. It could be, this architecture of cloud services that can also be included, but it is a blueprint actually for data storage, analytics, and distribution. And this control over the cloud architecture is increasingly important because it informs the governance of societal functions and sectors. Here you can also see that there are some services such as Facebook. You all know it because you all use it. It's Facebook ID, Google ID, Amazon ID, Apple Pay, Google Pay, Facebook Messenger, I don't know, Viber, WhatsApp, Google Mail, MS Mail, Skype, whatever. These are all, let's say, software solutions that you use, but the thing is that the infrastructures are also slowly appearing here as well. I will say something about that just in a second. But first, I want to tell you that the branches, so the top of the trees, the branches also show many societal sectors where this platformization with all of these software solutions is already taking the place. And here you see that there are some, you see news, mobility, education, finance. So that means that there are many, not only private, but also individual consumers, public, mostly serving citizens and guarding the common good. And this is maybe the example from this scandal that happened in the Netherlands. I think that from this perspective, maybe just to go back a little bit about the infrastructures that are coming into this trunk, that are penetrating into the trunk. I think that we are starting to notice, all of us, that more and more we depend on large platforms, and as such, for example, through Facebook, we depend on our presence in the social network. We are dependent on Amazon's retail network. If we want to buy stuff, we depend on Apple Pay and Google Pay to pay for the goods that we are buying, and to find information. We are really dependent on Google search engine or other search engines that you're using, Safari, and so on. Now we see that there are some interdependencies that are happening, which are not entirely regulated. But what's happening as well is that not only that we are dependent on Amazon if we want to order some goods, but the Amazon is also nesting itself in the medical sector, for example. It is nesting itself in the transportation sector, which is also important, which means that Amazon is not only within one platform, but it's penetrating different platforms, different sectors, and so on. So there is not only the penetration within the private lives and the penetration through algorithmic decision-making within the government, because we all depend on all of these services, but there is also the or cross-sectorial penetration between different platforms. To make it more plastic, maybe this specific picture will do, because the EU so far has reacted to, for example, the negative consequences of the platformization and what all of these technological giants have what they already have done. And we know that in recent years, the EU has imposed substantial fines on Google, for example, for anti-competitive behavior. The Amazon was investigated for unfairly using the data collected by third-party sellers. I'm not going to talk about, Google Analytica, about Cambridge Analytica, and so on, which is also one of the scandals that shook the American politics during the election period, and so on, and so on. But that is why, because of all of this is happening, the European governments, and especially Germany, has called for tech companies to take responsibility for example, removing unlawful content such as hate speech, discriminatory practices, and so on. So what do we do now? Where do we go from here, and how do we regulate this in terms of where do we go? Do we go to the citizens themselves? Do we go to the government itself? How does the government do it? Who are the actors? These are all the questions. Who are those actors that are, so the questions remain, who are the actors that are service providers? Who are the actors that are service developers? And where do they stand in this traditional notion of the rule of law, separation of powers, and so on? Are they higher, lower, horizontally, vertically? Where do they stand? Do they stand with the citizen? Do they stand together with the government? At some point, I remember when I was teaching, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was the multinational corporations that we were talking about. And at that point, I remember saying, yeah, but they're new kind of, we can almost treat them as sovereign state. And at this point in time, I almost think that those technological giants are new multinational companies. What the multinational companies were like 15 or 20 years ago are now the technological giants. And now we need to place them somewhere within the rule of law system. So the development itself, how does it work? It works in such a way that tech companies deliberately push their platforms between sectors. They deliberately push their platforms between infrastructures, between markets, non-markets, private, public interests, and so on. And of course, the conclusion is that such hybrid positioning of the tech companies actually poses serious challenges to regulators, lawmakers who are bound to act within a specific framework. And this framework could be, I don't know, competition law, privacy law, antitrust law, and so on. But all in all, they have to react within the rule of law. And the rule of law, we know what it is and what some of the concepts are. And I think when we talk about the tech companies, they also have very steady growth of power with a high risk of abuse. Remember the Tesla cars that I mentioned at the very beginning. So they do pose sort of to say challenges to the traditional separation of powers, because we don't know whether they should be part of this separation of power. And from that perspective, we don't know whether we should grant them that position or not. Should we redefine the separation of power? So do we need new concepts, or do we need to reinterpret the old concepts that we have? So from that perspective, we need to ask, is it the judiciary that now has to play a better role or a bigger role within the rule of law? So should we go back to the thin notion of the rule of law concept? And how do we even fit in, for example, media and civil servants, especially within the technocratic societies that impose algorithmic decision-making regarding their citizens? So lobby groups and so on. And just a few words about checks and balances. I think the idea should stay the same, at least towards me. I think what needs to be done, and this is just my personal opinion, and then I will wrap up very soon. If we go back to medicine, I think what we should do is that we should create more interdependence, and we should stimulate cooperation and coordination. But here, I think more accent should be on horizontal coordination. Horizontal, especially because we do not see that concept often developed in comparative literature or in national literature in particular. We mostly focus on vertical relationships within the multi-level governance, and that is a problem because in this sense, technological companies that are breaching in and penetrating, they're kind of left outside. So, for example, checks and balances could stay the same, but there should be more horizontal coordination. And of course, it should be based on a continuous dialogue between the actors. That would bring more cohesion, I think, and this is the concept of dynamic stability that I developed previously for the asymmetrical multi-level governance, but it applies here as well, because this is also an asymmetrical situation, asymmetrical relationship between the state and then those technological companies. There are, of course, obviously, horizontal and vertical imbalances, and how to counteract it. Well, there needs to be more trust in terms of accepting how to develop specific how to develop specific regulations and so on. So the government should trust the companies, and the companies also should trust the government. There will be no overpowering between them, trying to over-regulate, for example, but both should be adaptive to new conditions or to new times that are already here or ahead of us. And as I said, there should be more coordination, as I said, especially horizontal coordination between those. Further on, I think this also relates to legality and accountability to some extent, because I insist on legality, and this is why, because if we insist on legality, we know that law binds all of the actors. So it's the state actors, private actors, and in this case also technological giants or companies. This gives us the opportunity to have legal certainty, so to avoid the arbitrariness, and this is then related to legitimacy or democratic legitimacy in a broader sense. And that is why if we insist on legality, we can also connect it to legitimacy. If the relationships, for example, between technological companies and the governments, systems, states in their whole altogether, we know that there's, of course, as I said, vertical versus horizontal. There needs to be more horizontal relationships. So it just means reshaping the relationship towards them. That would also be a democratic legitimacy, dynamic legitimacy, also one of the concepts from the multi-level governance, but fits here, I think, pretty well. Because it is related to multilateral relationships, in this case between technological giants, states, and actors within the state. Whatever decisions are made are usually neutral, and then if something goes wrong somewhere in between, they can be intermediated. And then I think a very important aspect here would be maybe accountability to take into consideration. I also insist on that in putting together sort of the basis for the relations between the governments and technological giants. Accountability, I think, is very, very important for democratic control. It also relates to legitimacy in the sense that we have input, throughput, and output, and that from that perspective, because the accounter, which is, of course, the technological giant, will always inform about their conduct, but the other side will always have the opportunity to ask questions, interrogate about the new technology. As I said, when I ask my significant other, do you consider legal consequences? Do you consider moral consequences? And they say no. Well, the idea is to actually consider these consequences, and then on the basis of a dialogue to make a decision on what is actually the best thing to do. And that is, as I said, in terms of legitimacy, that definitely connects it to the legitimacy, because we do then have responsiveness and accountability, which is related to the output legitimacy, and we also have inclusiveness of all actors, and of course justifiable decisions if there is dynamic stability and dynamic legitimacy involved, because it connects all of them together into kind of a dialogue and conversation. To brief conclusion, for now, what we have is just some substantial laws which come from, in some systems they exist, in some states they exist, but mostly we have principles, for example, in the EU. We don't have much. And also what we need are the new instruments such as co-regulation that I just described, maybe some impact assessments, but I'm not that smart. I think I'm more like, I'm talking about this from the theoretical perspective. So yeah, ask me questions and then let's try to brainstorm. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Maja, for this. And I mean it, a very inspirational presentation, because it's really open-ended as life is currently is. And yeah, now we have time for discussion. I'll just stop the recording because it was necessary to